Three, two, one. Welcome to the Oh Brother podcast. I'm your host, Dan Smith. Alongside me, as always, my brother from the same mother, Mike Smith.
How you doing, Dan?
Good, man. Another week, August 8th, 2020, and here we are again.
For another episode of Oh Brother.
I'm excited about this one. It's, I don't know what we're going to call it, maybe a film swap or something. Oh Brother film swap.
Yeah, it's exactly what it is.
And this was your idea. If you're not following us on social media, make sure that you guys do. We'll kind of shout that stuff out later in the episode, but we want to just dive right in today. This can be a fun one. So set up the idea here that you had come up with, that you pitched, I don't know, this a few weeks ago at least, that you brought this up.
Yeah, my thought was we should do a show where we give each other a title, and then we, something that we haven't seen.
Yeah.
And we watch it and talk about that title. So I gave you a title, and then you gave me a title.
Yeah. It was fun. I mean, you could say you made it easy on me with your pick.
Definitely.
And it was really difficult for me to think about it because, first of all, you have such an extensive library.
Yeah.
And, what don't you have? What haven't you seen? And I wanted to find something that I thought you'd like, but was maybe a little bit outside of what you've, typically seen, and most importantly, one you haven't seen, obviously. So,
right.
So your pick for me was Stanley Kubrick's Dr. Strangelove.
Of course, it had to be a Kubrick, right?
Yeah, which he is. I have to say, he's my favorite all-time director.
Yeah,
and even with Welles, and Stanley Kubrick, to me, he's just right at the top of my list. But so, it was crazy that I hadn't seen this in all these years.
I was kind of you hadn't seen A Clockwork Orange.
That's right. And I since now have seen that, which of course I loved.
Right.
I loved that film.
I knew because of some of the performances alone, forget Kubrick, I was thinking more performance-wise, you'd really enjoy Strangelove, or How I Learned to Stop Worrying About the Bomb.
Right.
Title.
It's funny to say he's my favorite director, and yet I've seen a third of his movies. Although that's one of the sad things in diving into this one is just 13 feature films, I think, total. And you think of what he could have produced.
I know. Well,
if he had still been around.
Well, it's not so much that, it's that he took
so much time in between, right?
Bingo. 2 years to make a film.
And sometimes there was 5 years, 7 years. Look at Until Eyes Wide Shut came out. It was like at least 9 years or something.
And I remember Tom Cruise talking about how, Tom Cruise usually does a movie every 3 months.
Right.
And here he spent 2 years working on Eyes Wide Shut.
Yeah.
And I just think it shows in the quality. Sometimes there was studio issues. Like Dr. Strangelove had some studio issues.
There's so much to unpack with this movie. So
there's a lot.
We'll get into that. But so my pick for you, I thought a safe bet would be to somehow stay within the noir, because I just know that that's like right up there with maybe one of your favorite genres, if not your favorite.
Yeah.
And you've been kind of ODing on that lately.
Yeah.
But I thought if I could find something a little bit more obscure within that kind of genre, that maybe at least it would be something that would appeal to you. So I started pulling up these lists of lesser known noir type films. I don't know that this is really truly considered noir, but I'll let you speak to that when we get into it. But so I found this 1949 film called Border Incident with Ricardo Montalban, and
very young,
yeah.
Con.
The Fantasy Island fame. And I had told you that I saw the trailer. I looked it up on a list, and it kind of struck me, the story. And so I pulled up on YouTube the trailer, and I'm like, I want to see this film. And I since have. I've watched the film as well. I figured if you've seen Dr. Strangelove, I needed to see your film as well. So I've seen Strangelove and your film. So Border Incident, from and Dr. Strangelove. So how do you want to kick this off?
I don't know. Why don't you start with
You always want me to start.
well, the higher quality movie in this case.
So I got this from you.
Yeah, which
I've
is an
had,
older.
and that's another, I've had this in my collection for years.
Yeah,
Just never pulled it out. So, and
I've got the Criterion, of course.
of course. And I will tell you, I consumed all the extras on this.
Oh wow!
I watched every single extra on here.
So I can't throw you any curveball.
Not really. And I've done some homework online and watched a lot of YouTube videos and things. But and a lot of what I'll say is probably things that most people know, but was new to me. So it was really kind of fun to, digest all that stuff. And
Good.
just right off the top, the cover image.
Mm-hmm.
For years, I've been more acquainted with this image than I have with the film because I hadn't seen it. So to see the film now and now look at that in a whole different light is really kind of neat, But
see, the image I always put with Strangelove is woohoo, riding a
Slim
riding
Pickens.
a bomb.
Right, Slim Pickens.
To me, that's the image. When I think Dr. Strangelove, that's what I think of. I see Homer Simpson because they did it on The Simpsons. Where
there you go.
Riding the bomb.
Right.
That's a classic scene.
So, of course, it goes without saying the aesthetic quality of the film. Right off the bat, it's just striking. It's Kubrick. And like I've said to you, nobody to me paints a picture on film like he does. It's just, and it's weird. The performances are so good. The story's so fun and captivating that not that the directing obviously gets lost, but it's just, I don't know if you're taking it for granted or whatever, but some of the shots throughout this film are, some of the ones that come to mind, like right off the bat, Sterling Hayden, who of course we talked about with The Killing and Mom referenced in the last episode.
Go figure.
Which blew our mind. He was fantastic, but I'm thinking of this shot where, and Kubrick does this a lot, where he shoots from underneath, kind of like Orson Welles, that shooting up, and it, just such a, and the black and white too itself was very striking.
If you know how to use it, that was the thing in my film, Border Incident. It was black and white only because Technicolor wasn't in yet. It was really, there was no use of the there was some, but not like Kubrick uses it, or somebody like the Coen brothers.
Right.
If you watch their movie, they did Man Who Wasn't There.
Is that Billy Bob Thornton, right?
Billy Bob Thornton, a very thin, after we know him from, being kind of heavier.
Sling Blade,
A Simple Plan.
Yeah, there's a great movie.
I mean, almost looks like a different guy.
Yeah.
And he's, ever since The Man Who Wasn't There, he's been thin.
It's funny you say that because in looking back at some videos, some archival stuff with Peter Sellers, who we can talk about, he, of course, I grew up on the Pink Panther Peter Sellers. Right. That's kind of really where I was introduced to him. But I didn't, looking back at his really early stuff, even before he got into film, when he was in like radio and radio improv and stuff, he was a lot heavier. He was a bigger guy.
He was.
That threw me. I didn't realize that.
Yeah, and you see him in this, when he's playing like the president, you see him, he's a thin guy.
Right. So
give us an overall picture of, like, for somebody who hasn't seen Dr. Strange.
Yeah, so it's it's a satire, that would you're talking about the Cold War time with the kind of fear of nuclear war between us and the Russians, a very common theme throughout films, throughout that time. And so you've got this, essentially this, general played by Sterling Hayden, who starts to go, as Sellers says, as the president, a little funny, does a little silly thing, a little whacked out, and launches a first strike nuclear attack against Russia. And so you got
Right.
these B-52 bombers on their way. So throughout the film, it's kind of juxtaposed between the performances in this war room and then these B-52 bombers on their way to drop these bombs.
In the funny movies like this, there's always one guy that's itching to drop the bomb. There's always that character,
Yeah.
and then everyone else saying, "Well, maybe we should wait." I'm thinking of a Henry Fonda movie, and it just won't pop into my head real quick. But he played the president in a movie where, he had to make the decision whether or not to tell the Russians that we dropped the bomb by accident, and he winds up making the decision, and they launch. So basically, he had to decide whether or not we survive or everyone gets annihilated. And
Right.
he chose everyone gets annihilated.
Well, Kubrick, and this was not uncommon for him, this was kind of his MO. When he latched onto a subject, he would research that like to no end, right? So again, to your point earlier, that was also part of why such a long time in between films, because he would just immerse himself in that content, that subject matter,
Yeah.
and become an expert on it. And I think with this same thing, he read all of these books on thermonuclear war and, really sophisticated stuff. But this whole idea of that kind of deterrence factor that Dr. Strangelove refers to at one point towards the latter part of the film, where, just the fear of that happening keeps each side sort of in a neutral position,
Right.
which is a great sort of natural tension that builds throughout the film. But the way that he does this, and this, of course, now I do, but the fact that this was originally written and going to be a more dramatic, serious film.
Correct.
But it seemed, at least from what I researched, was that ultimately he felt like it would not go over or be received if it wasn't done in a satirical way.
And I'm sure you read about, George C. Scott wanting to
Yes.
do it very serious.
Yes.
So Kubrick said, "I'll tell you what, do it. We'll rehearse it, be a dope and do it funny, and then we'll shoot it serious."
Go over the top.
Yeah. And then he blindsided him and used the footage he said he wasn't filming.
That's
So
right.
that was hysterical.
It really was. It was interesting to hear that. And I saw an interview. It's actually on the extras on the Blu-ray. James Earl Jones mentions that.
Yes. He
And
was a pilot in it. He was a young guy.
it was his screen debut.
Yeah. Yeah.
It was
I
his
didn't know
film
that.
his film debut, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I knew he was a real young guy in it.
Yeah. And a fairly small part, but but he mentioned it. It was referenced in another interview that I watched, but and George C. Scott never worked with him again after that. That was it.
And,
He was done.
and it was such a smash,
Right.
and it worked so well.
And I'm glad you mentioned it because, as brilliant as Peter Sellers is in this film, uh, and again, I have to kind of put myself out there and say I haven't seen Lolita either, that'll be on my list next.
Right.
The performance that wins it for me, hands down, is George C. Scott. He is brilliant, brilliant in this movie. He's so funny, and I guess it's kudos to Kubrick
Correct.
for duping him into that and playing it over the top. But it's so masterful. I don't even know where to begin with. Right from the beginning, when he comes out and Miss Scott, the only female character in the whole film, actually,
Yes.
Tracy something or Tracy Reed
Right.
plays Miss Scott. When he comes out of the bathroom and he gets on the phone and he's getting the news about this whole thing happening, just this whole with the Hawaiian shirt and his belly hanging out, and you just know this guy. I'm going to enjoy the performance here. There's so many moments of his, and he reminded me of somebody throughout the film, and I still can't put my finger on who he reminds me of in that. But geez, I mean, I don't know. I didn't know that about George C. Scott. Was he ever in anything else that was comical in nature? I
Well,
think of
everyone remembers.
Patton, you know?
Yeah, everyone remembers Patton. Um, Not to this extent.
What year was Paths of Glory? That was after this, wasn't it? Or right?
I
Or
thought it was before, to
was
be
it
honest.
okay? Because
It's not one of the. It's I have that on Criterion too.
yeah,
It's not one of the films usually like when you see a Kubrick box set. For
right.
some reason, well, we know the killing's never in it because it was so early. Paths of Glory's never in it, and of all movies, I don't know if it's because it's different studios,
Yeah,
but Spartacus,
right.
talk about an epic.
Yeah, Kirk
And I don't know if
Douglas.
you've seen that. Just came out on 4K.
Mm,
You really gotta sit down because it's an epic. It's 3+ hours.
right.
But that was maybe his biggest epic. Yet it's never in all these box sets, and I gotta believe it's a studio or a licensing thing,
There's
something
a
like that.
there's a scene with George C. Scott you remember, and anybody that's seen the film that stands out, which I guess was a flub, but they just kept it in because of
When
the
he
way
falls.
it's so funny when he trips I mean, it looks like it was intended to be in the film.
When I first saw the movie, I kept saying that was like so good. How did they keep? And he just kept going.
Right.
And sure enough, that was a mistake. He really fell.
It's crazy.
And
And
to find out that, Kubrick kept it in because it worked so good, which it did,
yeah,
was brilliant. And
it
you mentioned him. I thought Sterling Hayden every time he was on,
oh, he was amazing.
he was so nuts.
And he came out of retirement to do that film.
Did he?
Yeah, he was in retirement at that point, which is great. I mean, to think, yeah, I think The Killing was 1945, 46, but yeah, he came out of retirement for this film.
See, because now it makes sense to me because this was after, I should have known this. I'm sure. Was it in the extras about him
About
coming out, or did you read
it
this?
was in one of the interviews. Yeah,
Because this was after the McCarthy hearings and he hated himself.
right.
You got
That's
to
right.
see this interview. It's on one of the Criterion where he is just, somebody interviews him he's in San Diego, and he says, what kind of a scumbag rats on his friends, and he was so down on himself. And I told you when we watched The Killing how um, they wanted him for Jaws in the worst way.
Right.
The character of Clint
The
was
character
written
of Clint.
for
Yeah.
Sterling Hayden.
Hmm.
And he was, at that point, he was in a tax evasion deal. He was living in, I don't know where, Canada, and they were literally going to sneak him into the country for it. That's how bad they wanted him. And now I think I'm like Clint, Robert Shaw was so good,
I could see Sterling Hayden in that role,
but
though.
I would have loved Sterling Hayden
He
in
would have
that.
been amazing in that. Yeah.
So, but
It
anyway, for me, every scene he was in
well,
was
and
almost a steal.
yeah, and him playing off Sellers improving. I mean, most of that interplay was improv by Sellers.
Right.
Hayden didn't really know what was coming next.
What was common?
Yeah, and not to bring up a heavy point, but I thought it was kind of another strange coincidence that here we're talking about both of these films. Really, the themes, you think about it, they're very topical even right now,
Very
and very topical. And we're right in the middle of the 75th anniversary of the bombing of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. I was like, wow, that's kind of really wild. But
And I've been there. I've been to
yes,
Hiroshima,
yes,
and I've been to the other side. I've also been to Pearl Harbor.
right,
I've seen both sides of that and been educated in both sides of it. Most people think, oh, we were attacked by the Japanese, screw them. But then you got to hear their side too. And although the attack, nothing forgives them attacking. Uh, man, to see the stories of how it decimated. And there's a peace park in Japan that
Right.
I've been to, that it's a big section of where the bomb fell that they keep exactly as it was. But surrounding that, it's like New York City. They rebuilt to a degree you would not believe.
So a couple of other notes here that are historical in nature. Again, as you're probably aware, the John F. Kennedy, the JFK connection, which of course the screening was scheduled on the day that JFK was assassinated.
That's right.
And so, of course, they scrapped it and ended up releasing it. They screened it in January, end of January of 64, as opposed to what it was November 22nd, I guess, 63.
And to think Kennedy had the Cuban Missile Crisis.
Right. And there was a dub, if you remember, of Slim I keep wanting to say Slim Whitman. Slim Pickens.
with the
Slim Whitman and Roger Whittaker.
We grew up on that Slim
I
Whitman.
know Slim Whitman. Good Lord. But when he's going through the contents of the box, that they all have, the rations and this and that, he goes, could have a heck of a time in Vegas with this. What he really says is Dallas, but they dubbed it because of the assassination.
That's right.
And so if you go back and watch it, you see where he says Dallas, another interesting thing that I saw in the extras was, well, there's two things. One was the title sequence done by this guy. I think his name is Pablo Ferrer or Ferror, something like that, or Ferrero, something like that.
Yeah.
He did the title sequence. And if you go back and look, there's a mistake. I guess Stanley called him at some point after it came out. He said, "Hey, you made, title sequence was great and everything, but you misspelled one of the words, and where it says based on a novel which was Red Alert, right?
Yes.
The novel, it says base on a book."
Oh, funny.
And there it is right there on the screen.
I've never caught it.
It's pretty wild. The other thing, the last thing I want to mention was Peter Sellers, of course, talking about his brilliance was the Dr. Strangelove accent, and how that originated from, I guess, based on this photographer that was he working, taking production stills on the set or something?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
This like an Italian guy or something.
Yeah.
He had this very distinct, and in the extras, they play these home recordings that Peter Sellers has of this guy.
Yes.
And they match it against it's spot on. This guy's accent is incredible.
So which character of Sellers did you like?
So just like Peter Sellers has said himself, my favorite was probably Mandrake, the British, Royal Air Force guard or whatever, and Dr. Strangelove. The president was a much more kind of subdued, straight character. Yeah, pretty straightforward. But between those two, probably Mandrake, I think overall would be my favorite character.
Yeah.
And especially where a lot of that stuff, I guess, much like the rest of his performances, were again very much ad-libbed on the set. The funniest, other than George C. Scott's entire performance, there's a scene in the war room when, of course, the very famous with the arm, and Strangelove he's got the phantom arm, Nazi arm syndrome or whatever's going on.
Yeah.
And there's the Russian ambassador, the guy that plays the Russian ambassador.
Yeah.
And he says, you could see him cracking up behind him.
Yeah.
And I guess on the set, a lot of the cast was just losing it watching him come up with all this stuff on the fly. But go back and watch that when you remember when his wheelchair kind of starts to turn towards the guy?
Yeah. Yeah.
And you can see him trying not to laugh, but it's so obvious he's laughing. It made me crack up.
That he was, I mean, this is a great acting seminar.
Animals will be bred and slaughtered. And you know, the whole story of the ending, I thought was, because I'll be honest, when I saw the ending, it was a little bit Sopranos. I was kind of like, what happened?
Yeah, yeah,
It come to find out that whole other ending that they didn't use for various reasons, some still related to the presidency too, and the fear that it was going to not look, you know, well upon the presidency, where they had this custard pie fight in the
yes,
war room that they cut. But so it ends with Dr. Strangelove getting up out of his wheelchair and, you know, mein Führer,
right.
I can walk.
I like the
Oh
ending.
my God.
I
Yeah.
like the ending.
But you know, in retrospect, and especially after watching some of the documentaries, it was the right decision. It makes sense, you know.
Yeah, yeah.
But I'll just end by saying I was blown away by George C. Scott. It's my favorite performance in that whole film, and that's more than Peter Sellers, I have to say.
I know when you think of Peter Sellers and Sterling Hayden's performance being so spot on, and George C. Scott steals the show.
I'm not going to do this justice, but there's one scene I have to mention because it was one of the funniest scenes to me was George C. Scott. The whole chewing gum affect too was just really funny when he kept chewing pieces of gum. It's something about that was really funny. But he's telling the president, you know, it take about he's something about the timeline. He's describing the timeline of when they're going to get there or something, the bombers. And then the president asks him something about, um, again, I'm going to screw it up, but, but George C. Scott responds to him and says something, in about 10 minutes, sir. Do you remember what I'm talking about?
I
Some
know
line.
exactly
It's
what
so
you're saying.
absurd, but he delivers it so straight.
Yeah, yeah, I know exactly.
Oh my God, that was so hilarious. He's just
I
what a
I
genius
thought
performance.
I thought they, after the movie had come out and had done so well, that they had kind of mended fences.
Yeah.
But according to you, they never spoke again.
That's now this one documentary is 2001, so it's kind of old, but you know, of course he's gone by then anyways,
Yeah,
as they
'cause I
both are.
know, I know he was furious when he found out that he literally had been tricked.
Yes.
But I would have thought when he saw the way it came out, maybe because he looked like such a fool some of the times,
That was the brilliance.
but that's what made
That
it
was the brilliance.
so watchable.
Yeah. So, you know, if there's anybody listening that hasn't seen Doctor Strangelove, like I hadn't seen it for all these years,
Yeah.
please do yourself a favor and go watch this film. So I'm appreciative that you forced me into watching it finally, because what a shame I hadn't enjoyed it all these years, you know?
Right. And you know, when I first saw it, I can remember I seen other Kubrick films and liked them, and there was something about the title, and I kept thinking, oh, I don't know if I really want to see this. And then when I finally watch it and it floors me, I'm like, oh my God, all these years I had been kind of pushing it to the side.
Yeah.
And then finally, so I'm glad, you know, I had two in mind.
Oh, what was the other one?
The other one was Asphalt Jungle.
Oh,
They were
that was
both Sterling Hayden.
it. Now, was that also Humphrey Bogart, like Mom
No,
said?
no.
Oh, okay. She thought that was
Asphalt
Humphrey Bogart.
Jungle wasn't Humphrey
Okay.
Bogart. Um,
Sterling Hayden again.
Sterling Hayden. I can see her getting them mixed up, but it's real, you know, real good film noir, and it's John Ford.
Yeah.
So of
Gosh.
course, you're gonna like it.
Absolutely.
So that was my original pick, and then I said I'm gonna make him watch Strangelove because he'll never watch it otherwise.
And I hardly talked about the directing. It almost just goes without saying that it's brilliant.
I
You know,
know,
the cinematography, the shots, it's so amazing.
and I
And
hope people will watch it because of this.
yeah, absolutely, it's brilliant. And we didn't talk about the music either. Like the score is really great, you
Yeah,
know. But I was start to finish, top to bottom, I was blown away by George C. Scott. I just loved that
really,
character, man. I
really.
loved it. All right.
And
So oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I know you're against media, but if you pick up the Criterion, there's even more tidbits
Yeah.
that you
Well,
love.
yeah. Listen, I mean, yeah, I'm all about the digital, but after seeing it, I'm like, I had to dive in because I didn't know this copy that I've had for so long, but it's chock full
It is.
of extras. So I
It
watched
is.
them all.
I have the digibook version that of the one you have,
Yeah.
and I also and the Criterion one just came out not too long ago. So I was so happy when they said when they got the rights to it.
Well, let's switch gears now and
Okay.
get to Border Incident 1949. I'm very interested and eager to hear your take on it. I hope it was something that you enjoyed, but let's find out.
I wouldn't say I hated it.
That's a good way to start.
Good way to start. But it's not one I'm going to recommend to anybody go see. But the topic, as you said, is quite. That's the first thing to hit you. The movie starts with you see guys with sombreros, so you just racially profile them as much.
Stereotypically think, yeah.
Yeah, and you can tell they're fleeing Mexico. So it's basically about immigration. But what a different story it tells than today's story of hate. And this is kind of the opposite. But as you said, the star, Ricardo Montalban, fine Corinthian leather, um, he is really young. I
Yes.
didn't look to see how old he was, but
I think he was about 30.
yeah, I was going to say he can't be more than 30.
Yeah.
I would think late 20s, somewhere around there.
Mm-hmm.
But it starts out, and this is what kind of ruined the movie for me in the beginning. It starts off with this really shocking, here's these guys fleeing the border, and they get jumped and they get stabbed. I mean, I was like, geez, wow,
Yeah.
this is
In the Canyon of Death.
yeah. So they get stabbed and then they get thrown into this terrible looking quicksand.
Quicksand, right.
And the thing that ruined it, if you I don't know if you caught this or not, but one of the guys that's in the quicksand, he's all worried about going under the water because it was like water with, I don't know, crust. And the actor's like, his eyes are moving and he's supposed to be
He
dead.
was already murdered. Yeah.
Right, he's
I
supposed
know.
to
I
be
did see
dead,
that.
but
Yeah.
he's going under and he's making these faces and he's like freaked out that he's going into this quicksand. And right there was some of that schlock. It was in it at different spots, but that scene sets up. I'm like, wow, this is like the murders were pretty brutal, I thought.
Yeah.
So then we kind of cut from there to a boardroom.
Now, what did you think about, just to interject for a sec, the narration that's going on from the beginning? Because I know, again, it calls to your enjoyment of film noir.
Right. That's very noirish, where it talks about the, how California gets its water and how the crops and all of that, and how migrant workers called braceros,
Right.
they're the migrant workers that picket, and they're responsible for most of our country's food supply.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And so, yeah, that was very, if I was to describe this, I would say it was a little noirish Mexican film,
Mm-hmm.
like a Western, noir Western. That would be my description. But we cut after that, you're right, because that was very noirish. I thought it was going to be kind of straightforward noir, but it changed to more of a, not a shoot 'em up, but a Western kind of picture, except for the real classic stuff. So we go to this boardroom, and there's Ricardo Montalban, and he's a federal agent. I don't know why the feds are working on this, because this would normally be something the border control would do, but let's suspend that. So he's sitting there, he's a Mexican federal agent sitting with a United States federal agent, which he knew, and they were concerned not about the illegal immigration. They were concerned about the immigrants that were going back to the border, going back across, getting murdered.
Right.
They were trying to help each other from stopping these murders.
See, and I thought that would have been a character that you would have been into somewhat from the beginning. George Murphy, I think, was the actor that played the American agent. Yeah, because it was very, again, kind of that noir, very kind of choppy dialogue.
And I was, but almost at the beginning when he's following the guys down to Mexico, and he's so brazenly goes by the door and gets seen,
right?
By the other guy. To me, I'm like, come on, it's just not believable. I hate to say that because it sounds like I'm nitpicking, but it was ridiculous. I know, but it was so ridiculous. But anyway, so getting back to the story, unlike today where, we're being taught by our president to hate immigrants and immigration is bad. And he campaigned on, I'm going to build a wall and keep them all out, not to mention he's an immigrant and we're all immigrants. But it's, in today's climate, to see a story where they're really trying to protect the immigrants because, an issue of fairness that, hey, it starts out where they're talking about legal immigration mostly, where there's tons of immigrants. It reminds me of On the Waterfront, where a bunch of laborers, they kind of meet, and then a guy calls random people. Yeah, Joe Smith, come on. Yeah, Randy Newman, you come on. So in that sense, that's all these legal immigrants that have working papers. And again, those are called braceros.
Right.
And they're all standing around hoping to get called. And that's when the federal agent played by Montalban acts like he's a bracero.
Right.
Is standing there talking to a guy crying. Am I dragging?
No, you're good.
Oh. He's talking to a guy trying to figure out how you go over legally.
Yeah.
And talking to this nice guy who's trying to get, work so he can help his family.
Juanito.
And I was hoping, a happy ending for Juanito, which it wasn't. Spoiler, nobody's going to watch the film, but spoiler.
Oh, come on. It's a fresh movie on Rotten Tomatoes, just for the record.
Yeah, it's about 67.
That's decent.
Over the line. Yeah.
It's more than time. It's more than Time Cop.
It makes me laugh. But anyway, so there we see, Ricardo Montalban pretending, and it's basically just Ricardo Montalban with a sombrero, no different. He almost dressed the same. So,
but he had a denim jacket on at least.
Yeah, didn't look much different. And it's funny because they do point it out because he says to this guy, how do I get over if I don't have, if I get picked?
70 pesos.
And pay this guy 70 pesos.
Tell him you want to go across the border, and that's it.
And they show how they smuggle him in a truck.
Yep.
And having lived in San Diego for 25 years, very close to the border. I mean, I was 15 minutes from the border and made many trips into Mexico. You would watch the news and see people in they will hide them in car engines, and it's awful what people will sacrifice to get across the border and back. And basically to make what they were paying these guys is 25 cents an hour. But the bad guy who was basically selling these guys was making $3 or more for each guy. So anyways, Montalban figures a way, pays 70 pesos. And the one thing, the woman that's checking the guys wants to see their hands.
That's right.
And Ricardo Montalban, you could see him going, oh,
Soft
God.
hands.
And she's like, you're no Burricero. Or she goes, go ahead. And then as soon as he leaves, she says to one of the bad guys, he's no Burricero. His hands are too soft.
Right.
You know, they can tell he's a worker in an office.
Right.
But anyways, the guy you were talking about that follows them down, the agent from the U.S. side, comes to a horrific death.
Horrific. I
thought they were going to rescue him.
I did too, but then you realize Montalban and the guy that played Juan, they were so far away. There was no way on earth they were going to save him. It was very horrific ending. I thought, oh, he's going to be surprised to see this guy meet his fate this way.
And it was almost, again, I almost laughed because I was thinking of Austin Powers when he's driving
the bulldozer, not bulldozer, right? Like a half a mile an hour.
Yeah, and the guy's like, ah!
It was. It was
10 minutes.
It was. It was silly.
It went on a little long.
It did.
The guy was like, digging in the dirt for 10 minutes.
But I think the payoff was that they did kill him.
Yeah, but they did kill him, and so Montalban gets over there, and from there, one guy dies on the trip, which is very common.
The older guy, right?
The older guy that paid his 70 pesos.
They just dump him in the dirt and move on.
Exactly, and that's pretty realistic. So I kept thinking a lot about today and how we're dealing with immigration right now, and how there's so many immigrants. And I used to see these workers when I would drive from San Diego inward to some of the richer areas. You drive by these fields of strawberries and you see these workers, and it's blazing sunny, just really hot, and they're in Del Mar picking God knows what. There's a couple of things that go wrong. The bad guy all of a sudden doesn't want the laborers, and there's some negotiating deals that fall through, so they wind up working for the guy that was about to sell them, and then they decide this isn't worth it, let's just get rid of them all, and they take them to this canyon where they're just going to dump them in that infamous quicksand, and Montalban gets thrown. There's a couple of times where I thought the director Anthony Mann, who you could have picked a couple of movies of his that were more noirish.
Yeah, well, I was wondering if you were familiar with any of his other work.
Yeah, he did a movie I know with Henry Fonda.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Jimmy Stewart, I think it was. That was more well known. But yeah, and I thought he did a good job of building tension in the movie. And there was, Ricardo Montalban was like this close to getting nipped a couple of times. One where he was sneaking away, basically to get a message across that the guy was killed. The guy from the U.S. was killed, and he gets caught. And he says, oh, I was just, heading into town, So, but there was more than once he was facing death, it looked like he was going to get killed, but everyone around him seemed to get it. Then he gets thrown into the quicksand when they decide to just purge these guys, which, again, this happens, and that's the sad part about it. And Ricardo Montalban gets saved by Juanito.
Did you notice when he gets pulled out of the quicksand, it looks like he just took a nice hot shower? I don't know if you noticed that. That's a goof. That's a
he did look pretty good coming out of that.
Well, it's a flub in the movie because he comes out, his hair's all slick, nothing on his face.
Right. See, there were moments like that, like I said, where the U.S. guy sneaks across in the worst possible way. Those were enough to like dampen the film for me. I didn't hate it. I didn't not. I liked watching it.
I think you're being overly critical. I thought it was a decent film.
But that's me,
Yeah, there were a couple of, goofy, kind of laughable bits, but
and it wasn't it wasn't a laughable subject, I guess, is what the issue for me was.
Right.
But ultimately, Juanito, perishes. And I wanted him, of everyone in the movie, I think if Pablo went down, I would have been okay with that.
Was it me, or was he was he Pedro Pascal's doppelganger? That guy could have played the Mandalorian, which
He
actually
looked a lot like him, didn't he?
Mandalorian shirt
Oh,
on.
he's got the shirt on.
Yeah, he looked a lot like Pedro Pascal. Yeah.
Speaking of which, and I'll just throw this out as an ending point. Last night, I just happened to start watching on HBO. Have you heard about the show with he plays the Hulk now?
Mark Ruffalo?
Mark Ruffalo is in a HBO series right now that's based on a novel. And it's something like, that's all I need to say about that, or something. That's not it, but it's like that. And he plays twins.
Oh, yes, I have heard about this.
Identical
Yeah,
twins.
I've heard it's pretty phenomenal.
So far, it's frightful, and it's pretty. He looks like he gained a lot of weight.
Yep.
For one of the brothers.
I heard.
And he must have filmed them at different times.
He did.
But to show you the leap in technology from yesteryear, where some of these flubs were just signs of, hey, we can't, like that quicksand thing looks stupid, but how else are you going to show it? Today, it would look like, I don't even know I guess there is quicksand somewhere. I've never seen it, but anyway, I didn't want to go, I would recommend that Mark Ruffalo show on HBO. I wouldn't recommend this movie, although I did sort of like it.
Yeah,
there's just too many other ones that are
I feel like you just took a negative, like, what did you like about the film? It doesn't have to be a negative review. I mean, there was some pretty good directing by Mann, I thought. Some really nice shots.
Yeah, and I think the flubs just ruined it for me.
What about the guy, whoever did the motorcycle action?
I thought that was good. You're right. When he got on the train tracks,
that was unbelievable.
They were chasing him. That was a very good chase. And like I said, that was a very tense scene. Mm-hmm. I thought, and that's one thing I really think Anthony Mann does the best, is he creates tension in his movies.
The way that he used lighting, but like it would be like a flashlight, get that light off my face.
Yeah.
But it was his excuse to be lighting the scene in a certain way.
Exactly right.
I thought it was a good use of lighting.
Yeah, and I'm not disagreeing with any of that. And again, I'm not saying I didn't like watching it. I just don't think there's enough for me to recommend it.
No, that's fair.
Yeah,
I don't know that I would have. I ended up renting it as you did.
Yeah.
I kept debating because it wasn't too much more to buy it, but then I'm like, because I'm like, I'm going to regret it if I really like it, and then I didn't buy it and wasted.
But see, you're probably glad you rented it, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's a film I would maybe watch again, but it's not it's not on our top 5 film list.
Yeah, I think of the stack of movies I have.
Right.
This just isn't going to get playtime.
Now, I was gonna, as the other film that I was gonna give you was The Detective with Frank Sinatra,
right?
Robert Duvall, and so, and that was still debatable up until the last minute almost that was going to be the film. I'm sure you're wishing now that had been the one, but
I don't want to. Again, I don't want to give. I know I sound negative. I always do, but
still good to see a film you haven't seen before.
Yeah, and these are the kind of films I'm watching like night after night. So it's not like I just finished the Ida Lupino box set, which has 4 movies in it, and 3 of them were good. One of them I was like, I'm never going to watch this again.
You must have recognized, I think Jack Lambert's his name, who had a small role. He was one of the heavies that was, guarding some of the groups of immigrants, the Braceros. He was, he's good. Yeah, he was in Bonanza and a lot of other films, but I think he's best known probably for Bonanza and then a film he did a few years before the border incident. But he's got a very recognizable face. He played a lot of heavies because he's got that kind of Nick Nolte looking,
I
square
probably
jawed.
did. I
Yeah,
probably did say, hey, that guy looks familiar.
he's the one who's hanging on the truck.
Yeah,
Which was
yeah,
kind of a goofy scene, I will admit, when
correct.
Montalban's, and then he finally falls off the truck.
Exactly,
That's
exactly.
Jack Lambert. Yeah.
Okay, okay. Yeah,
So okay, so
those little things, but like you said, I think the rating is accurate. 67, 70% out of 100 is pretty
yeah,
accurate,
crit.
which is just good.
Yeah, fan percentage a little less than that, like in the 50s, I think
Yeah, but
57 or something. But
again, I think there's so many other movies I would throw out in front of it that
yeah,
it's hard for me to say, yeah, go see this.
it's tough. There's so many. Again, I was trying to just go a route that I knew was something you hadn't seen, and
Yeah, I
but
thought it was a good pick.
not a fair matchup though. Dr. Strangelove
Well,
versus, but again, interesting that they're both very topical and there's themes that are
right.
so relevant right now. So that was kind of a nice
And you
coincidence.
know what you were picking at the time.
Right.
Where maybe if you had watched it, you would have said, well, he's going to pick this apart or something. You might have went with the detective. I don't know. But I knew, Strangelove was a 5-star movie.
Yeah,
And I knew you were going to eat it up. So
that's
it
damn
wasn't a
near.
fair kind of swap.
It's
But
almost 100% fresh on Rotten Tomatoes.
yeah, it should be.
It's his most highly rated film, I believe.
Um,
At least from that standpoint, like Rotten
Probably,
Tomatoes,
yeah.
Yeah, it's like 98%.
Spartacus must be up there.
Yeah.
Spartacus must be high.
Yeah.
And I know people who see, you haven't seen Paths of Glory yet. People who see that always have a pretty strong reaction to it.
It's kind of funny. I've based my love of Kubrick on a very small number of films. It was always Full Metal Jacket, The Shining, Eyes Wide Shut, and 2001: A Space Odyssey. That was, for me, that's really been, what hooked me.
And right now there's like,
and now The Killing I can add, and Dr. Strangelove.
And there's another one, Fear and something, which always gets forgotten. But yeah, like, geez, imagine going to a Kubrick, like they do at the different cinemas we like to go to, where they're small and they play older movies. To see the Kubrick movies, but of course they're so long.
Well, I told you they're doing that down here. They're doing a Kubrick, and I was like, I'm just not ready to go back to the theater yet.
Yeah, which I think I'm going to blog about. We're going to add that feature, and I'm going to blog about today, the state of the movies today, because it's really kind of sad.
Yeah, you even
we would have definitely gone to.
Oh, without a doubt, without a doubt.
TVs on the big screen, but the one great thing is there's been, like, 2001 was just restored by the guy who did Batman, Christopher Nolan.
Mm-hmm.
There's a 4K that looks stunning. The Shining was just remastered in 4K. Then we have Dr. Strangelove just done, remastered by Criterion. So his films are really starting to get another look. Not that, I think everybody that knows his work respects his work. And you and I are huge fans of Eyes Wide Shut. I don't know why that didn't do better.
Yeah, I love it. I don't either. I mean, that's one we ought to dive into just on its own, because
maybe the nudity bothered people.
And but again, you like, look at, now that I've seen A Clockwork Orange, I'm like, that's
nothing.
That's as graphic as Eyes Wide Shut.
Think of A Clockwork Orange when I saw it back in the 70s.
Absolutely. For the time, that was 10 times more graphic.
Really graphic.
I was like, whoa, like out of the gate, so I don't know. Is Tom Cruise factor? I don't know. Well, I think that's worth delving into. We'll have to do that at some point.
Yeah, and there's a lot of theories about that movie that I've read that would be great conversations between us. I don't know if anyone would listen to it.
Well, and you know what? There's another one. I haven't seen this. Maybe you probably have, but AI. We probably ought to talk about that too at some point
Yeah, that
because
was going to be his
the
final.
sort of unfinished, yes, and then Spielberg ends up,
And I think if you have you watched it?
No, I haven't.
If you watch AI, I think you can see the difference between Kubrick and Spielberg in it. You'll be like, yeah, that's Kubrick for sure. And then all of a sudden it gets Spielbergized. And you're like, oh, that's Spielberg.
Yeah, Kubrick's so distinct a look.
He wrote that, didn't he? AI, wasn't he?
Well, they were. I mean, I'd have to go back and look, but they were collaborating on that for quite some time.
And I think it was supposed to be filmed before Eyes Wide Shut.
I think you might be right. You might be right.
But I would love to see. I just know what his vision of it would have been compared to what it turned out to be. And it wasn't a big hit. It's not on anybody's top 10 list.
Yeah, it's a shame. Again, what we could have added to his filmography in all of these years that he's been gone. So
it's like Orson Welles. Now Orson Welles is a much more difficult because he kind of kept himself away because he didn't want to work in the studio system. And
right.
He'd always go on Merv Griffin and say, hey, I'm available to work, but nobody wanted to work with him because he was a pain in the ass. Where Kubrick was too, but people were willing to say, take 2 years, I don't care, as long as you're going to give me something brilliant.
Well, speaking of brilliant, so Dr. Strangelove, if you don't have it, add it to your collection. Border Incident, I mean, it was worth a couple dollar rental. I had no problem with that.
$3
for something I hadn't seen. So it was
pretty good. I got to admit, it was standard definition, and I thought this is going to be all cracks and pops. And
it's pretty nice. Pretty good
for a 1949 movie.
Pretty good transfer.
It holds up pretty good.
Yeah, it does. Well, you mentioned Quicksand and Border Incident. Another movie I can think of that there's a somewhat of a quicksand reference is The Rise of Skywalker, which of course is our August monthly movie giveaway.
That's right.
And so for those who aren't aware, we are doing a monthly movie giveaway. This month it's Star Wars The Rise of Skywalker Episode 9, a very sweet 4K Ultimate Collector's Edition. And we've got that out on social media. And if you're not following us already, make sure that you do. You can find us on Twitter, Instagram. We've got a Facebook page. We've got a YouTube channel that you can subscribe to. We'd love you to do that. And, like our videos, hit the notification bell so you're aware anytime we push out new content there.
By the way, I really enjoy the Instagram posts. There's always something that makes me chuckle, whether it's a floating RoboCop or...
That's right, because I don't consult with you on a lot of that.
No, I just all of a sudden get a notification and I check it out. I'm like, hey, that looks pretty funny.
Trying to be creative with what they give us.
Yeah.
If you want to follow us on Instagram or Twitter, for example, you can find us at OB Podcast. That's OHB as in brother podcast. And we also have a listener line. So we love to get voicemails from listeners, and that's 407-476-8781. Now, with the monthly movie giveaway, you got to follow us on social media and then just drop us an email. Just send us an email at obpodcast@gmail.com and tell us, hey, I want Rise of Skywalker and why you want it. It can be anything. We just want to hear from you, but you got to email us, right?
Yep. Just send us a note like Harold did last week where he won
Howard.
Roxanne. Hopefully he has it.
Howard?
Oh, what did I say?
You said Harold, I think.
I did.
Yeah, you're thinking of Uncle. You're thinking of our Uncle Harold. True story, folks.
Yeah, Yeah, true story. True uncle, anyway.
True.
Oh, that was something I meant to say about this movie. In the beginning, it says based on a true story. And right away, I questioned that because why would the feds be working where? And I don't know, maybe back in the 49s, there wasn't a border patrol. I didn't
Yeah, I don't know
research
when
that
CBP
much.
came into. Yeah, I don't know the
And
timeline
ever
there,
since
but
Fargo, I'm not a sucker for based on a true story anymore.
right,
Ever since I got duped by Fargo, because I thought
right.
that was a true story, and it wasn't. That really bummed me out because I'm thinking the whole time all this freaky stuff happening. So I don't know if this was based on a true story or not. Quicksand and the Canyon of Death.
Canyon de la Muerte or Muerta. I don't know. My Spanish
Yeah.
is horrible.
Where we throw the braceros.
The braceros
I love that name.
yeah, those that work with their hands, right?
Yeah, no, actually, it's if you look at it, literally says migrant worker under the definition.
Does
I
it
actually
really?
looked it up. Yeah,
Oh,
I
that's
looked it up
interesting.
because it sounds like a bracero is like a cowboy or
Right.
something, but it's migrant worker.
Well, this has been another fun one.
Has it?
I mean, I just thought
I
for
like
the record
Dr.
it was worth
Strangelove.
saying.
He's funny.
Oh, George C. Scott, man.
By now, people are
Go
tuned
what?
out.
Yeah, this is just for us.
Yeah, this is
Yeah, I mean,
we're the only ones going to hear this.
2 minutes and 30 is where most drop out, but that's okay. we'll cut this down to a 3-minute and 30-second episode.
Yeah.
Make sure we get people listening to the end.
Yeah, just so we get them on Dr. Strangelove.
But that does it for another episode of the Oh Brother podcast. I've been your host, Dan Smith. Alongside me, as always, my brother from the same mother, Mike Smith, and we will see you next week.
Bye, everyone.